Hello, everyone. My name is Yaron Hazan, VP Regulatory Affairs at ThetaRay. ThetaRay is an intuitive artificial intelligence company that provide big data analytics solutions for financial crime detection, mainly to financial institutions. My background is 20 years of fighting financial crime and investigations and financial crimes throughout the Israeli police, PwC, HSBC, and in the last almost 4 years with ThetaRay. I brought here the case of the Russian Laundromat as it was published. Between the years 2010 and 2014, billions of dollars from Russia, Latvia, Moldova, Cyprus for a while came to Western Europe, to the UK, to other countries in Western Europe. Those billions of dollars worth of corrupted money, white-collar related money, stolen money or whatever, they all went through a very sophisticated mechanisms by the people who were responsible for moving these funds throughout the different territories in order to bypass all the current and existing controls, and they knew exactly how controls work in the bank. We'll show later on exactly what I mean. Bank spent, once it was published by the media, like you see in the article in front of you, bank spent a lot of effort, many analysts, to investigate open source data, to search for evidences and facts within their own data, and to see how much they were exposed to this scheme. And the one specific bank that worked with us, for example, in the UK, invested 6 months of almost 10 analysts that investigated all the open source published media articles about this until they found 428 transactions that are relevant for the modus operandi. All these findings were a coincidence. None of them came because the bank realized exactly how the scheme worked. And it's somehow similar to one MDB scheme, if anybody remembers. The result that ThetaRay found within less than a week of work, including the preparation and the analysis, we detected several patterns of money laundering within the SWIFT data of that bank. And we analyzed 200 million SWIFT messages. Out of these, ThetaRay found 8,400 anomalies. That means that in terms of number of activities, it's less than 0.0 something percent. As you can see, it's a very small number in terms of detection accuracy and potentially false positives and overload on analysts and people who need to explore and investigate the cases. Those cases that we found, of course, included the 428 known modus operandi transactions or cases the bank already identified. And ThetaRay also, as I said, clusters the patterns by behavior, clustered the cases for us in 7 groups. When we explored the 7 groups and investigated, me from our side and experts from the bank from the other side together to understand what the system told us, what is the story of the behavior of those potential bad guys behind the scene, we actually found something that is very unique. Until today, most of the detection focus of the banks for anti-money laundering risks was, first of all, their own current accounts, their own customers, and therefore, the first stage of money laundering. In this analysis, we actually realized that we found schemes that go from one foreign country through another foreign country, a low-risk country, from a high-risk country to a low-risk country, sometimes even more than one, then targeted to the UK in our example, or maybe even other country through the UK, when the bank that worked with us was also only the intermediary bank. And this, I defined it back then as rotation scheme, as those movements of funds between different risk territories that actually revealed that we found layering and integration phases of money laundering, not only the placement as banks usually focus on. So we had 200 million SWIFT messages that were summarized by the system to 8,400 anomalies. When we investigated further the results, we realized several characteristics. One of them is that the accounts were usually open 6 to 12 months before any money laundering activity. So they opened the account, started to establish some growing activity until they reach a certain amount, and then maintain this amount for years. The activity increased over time to make sure that no monitoring system that identified or tuned to identify spikes, sudden spikes in the activity will find it. The value of the transfer was always between 300 to 700,000 British pounds. When I saw it, immediately I searched for a specific regulatory requirement for currency threshold reporting in the UK, and I found none at the beginning. But then when I took some advices from friends from HSBC or people who worked in the UK for years, they told me that in 2007, there was a requirement from banks to report unusual large transactions, cross-border transactions. Most banks set the threshold for this specific requirement around £1 million. And you see that these guys knew exactly what the control environment is, so how to bypass it. They opened shell companies. Each shell company was opened with a real name of a real company and real name of owners of the company, but it had no real business activity behind it. They kept defining the companies as low-risk industries and knew exactly the risk model, how to choose to describe the company as a company that works in an industry that will be selected as a low-risk industry. All the systems that you have now out there, screening systems such as Quantexa, LexisNexis, WordCheck, that go into company house, that go and search who is registered as the owners, would have not identified anything because they kept real people and different people in those different companies to be set as the owners. None of them had any criminal background. And another interesting thing that we found, although they exposed themselves so much to currency exchange rates, none of them used hedging activity, hedging services by the bank to defend themselves against the exposure to different currencies. And none of them declared high-risk country or either Latvia or Russia as main country of operation. But we saw that actually most of the money came from there. All these 8,400 anomalies were actually connected to 51 beneficiary accounts. That means if each anomaly represents unusual behavior, in that case it was per month, per customer, so the 8,400 only related to those 51 beneficiary accounts. All of them were small businesses or medium-sized businesses. And we saw through the results of the analysis that they worked through several consistent intermediary accounts and 10 originating accounts in those specific countries that I mentioned earlier. So not only that we were capable to identify very accurately relatively small amount of transactions that is interesting for that type of risks, through these transactions or anomalies that were detected, all of us in ThetaRay and in the bank learned new patterns and exactly the behavior of the modus operandi. None of us could explain it earlier. The system explained it to us by the different characteristics of the unusual behavior. And at the end, it was only 10 originating accounts and only 51 beneficiary accounts. So we actually found the needle in the haystack. Just an example, when we say that the system told us exactly what happened and what were the characteristics of this scheme. So this is a representative cluster from this case. In the representative cluster, the leading features are the number of high-risk countries involved in a path payment of a SWIFT message, the originating country risk, because we know for anti-money laundering and for many other financial crimes, the source of funds is potentially one of the most interesting criteria. Originating bank risk, because some of the banks are known to be the weakest or weaker link in the chain of banks. And in correspondent banking, all banks are dependent on each other. they have to trust each other, and they have to trust each other's controls in order to enable cross-border activity and the international payments. The destination country frequency. If usually funds are sent through this specific bank from this specific territory to, let's say, France, and now many funds are being sent to Cayman Islands or to Jersey or to British Virgin Islands, it's a change in the behavior. Now, as you see, each parameter by itself doesn't tell you that there is a crime involved. But when you see the full picture, it's like seeing the full puzzle after you connected all the pieces. Immediately you understand what you're talking about, and you understand what actually happened. And then you have here the rotation risk indicator, and this is the name I gave it after the case, which means that it came from a low-risk country, from a high-risk country, through a low-risk country to the destination of funds. At the bottom, you see the identifier of the increasing activity over time, only one transaction per month. They knew that there are rules that search for split of activity. So each time from any originating account to any target account, they have sent only one transaction between 300 and 700,000 pounds, as I said earlier, never passed the 1 million, of course. Thank you very much for listening. I hope it was interesting and useful for you. We will be happy to address any question you may have through my contact details over here, and enjoy the rest of the conference.